Hello and welcome to Pots and Trowels. My name's Martin and I'm joined by Sean and Jill.
Hi.
Hi there.
And on this episode, I'm going to be talking to Niall from the Yorkshire Mushroom Emporium to find out how they produce kits that you can grow your own oyster mushrooms at home.
And we've got some listeners' questions coming up. We've got a question on dahlias and a question on nettles and compost.
And Martin's got some jobs to keep us busy in the garden. I think one of them is for me to do. And then just having a think about how you make the most of those mushrooms when you've grown them in your kit.
Fabulous. But first, let's hear from Niall.
Niall, how did the Yorkshire Mushroom Emporium get off the ground?
Well, it was started by 5 friends about 3 years ago, 2021, and we'd all kind of been living in different places. We found ourselves back in around Leeds, Ilkley kind of area. We all went to school in Guiseley, and we'd all been kind of seeing similar things during the COVID pandemic around like food supply issues, lots of shortages of fresh food, obviously for different reasons. But we've been looking at that. A few of the other guys had worked in kitchens and stuff, and they were foodies. And then I'd done more kind of like bit more of allotment growing, and a few botanical groups when I was at university and that kind of thing. So I was kind of bringing that side. And we were all kind of talking about different. It seemed like we all had this idea of wanting to do some kind of project or business or kind of community garden or something along those lines to do with growing, to do with food. Maybe a little business. We thought, we could grow, just little microgreens for restaurants or little herbs just for restaurants. And that's kind of how it started. And then mushrooms was just something that that one of us, I think I'd started to hear a few things about mushroom growing online around the few months before. I'd heard it on a podcast, Merlin Sheldrake, who's got a book which some people know, Entangled Life. I'd heard him on a BBC 4 podcast, and then I'd seen something else, and then I'd started to see these videos of Americans, mostly on YouTube, growing mushrooms in shipping containers and things.
Right, yes.
I thought, how do we get into that? And then we looked up, and there was this little business or kind of social enterprise in Devon that were basically running kind of online courses, how to grow mushrooms and how to start a small scale mushroom farm.
Because it's not your first or I suppose main career. You had a career before you did this and still do, in fact, don't you?
Yeah, so I guess I was doing a few different things after university, and then after having done like a biochemistry degree, and then a little bit before the mushroom started, I'd picked up a job during COVID with the NHS, just in Leeds, doing basic admin work. So I'm still doing that now, 3 days a week. I've managed to kind of do part-time over the last few years, and have some flexibility with the way I've worked, which has allowed me to have time to do the mushrooms. So yeah, I'm still doing that. And then Ed, one of the other guys, made the leap to the mushrooms last kind of end of summer. So he had a kind of full-time job, and he was just, not managing to do everything, because it was a lot of evenings and weekends before. But now I'm there 2 days a week during the week, and Ed's there kind of three and a half. So it's just working a lot better when you've got that thinking time during the day rather than trying to do things that
Exactly,
work. It just doesn't work.
Well, I mean, and it's fascinating what you do, because I mean, I think going back a long time ago, mushroom kits were quite popular sort of in the 80s and 90s, and then they sort of fizzled out. And I think what you brought along is a much better version, because it's not just the ordinary field mushrooms, you're growing different types of mushrooms as well. I mean, did you find it difficult once you'd got this idea to say, let's do grow mushrooms, to sort of, to be able to get the materials and to, it's not like buying a packet of seed off a shelf in a garden centre, is it? And sowing them.
Sure.
There's a lot more involved. So how did you find all of that?
It's, I guess, at first, like anything, there's quite a lot of research to do into it. But like I said, this course that we'd done had really helped, and there was a bit of a kind of online community with that as well, which was this. But I should mention yet the style of mushroom growing that we do is this technique it's called low tech, and the idea is that if you looked at our farm and see the growing setup, you think, oh, it looks like quite high tech because there's metal ducting and there's humidifiers and there's lights and things, but there's no single piece of equipment which is really particularly high tech or high power.
Yeah.
In a lot of like the commercial mushroom growing, that you have to use a lot of energy, power, steam and heat to sterilize the substrate, whereas with this low tech version you kind of are able to use you kind of benefit from some of the species like the oyster mushrooms that we grow that are able to, they're a bit hardier kind of varieties,
Right, okay.
Think of it like that, so they don't need to have the full sterilization, so it meant that when we were starting off we didn't need to have much money to invest in it, and with the oyster mushrooms is the other benefit to doing this low tech style of growing, because the oyster mushrooms can grow on things like straw and cardboard and wood chip, whereas obviously in the wild you'd see them growing on a tree, but oyster mushrooms particularly, not all mushrooms do this, but oyster mushrooms have got a ability to feed on different kinds of substrates.
And I didn't realise till we chatted once before that, because you've got some oyster mushrooms here, you've got the kits which we'll talk about, but you've also got some that you've grown and harvested in trays. Some of the oyster mushrooms are actually native to the UK, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So like these grey oysters that we're looking at here, they're native to the UK. I've seen them a couple of times in the wild. Some people say, oh yeah, there's certain trees where they'll come like every year and they'll just be absolutely covered in them. When you see some of the other varieties which are just kind of coming into the season for them now, so there is some seasonality. There's the pink and the golden kind of ones, which I'm not sure if you've seen them in person before, but they're other kinds of oyster mushrooms, but they're not native. So they're the golden ones are from kind of eastern around China, and then the pink ones are actually from tropical. Pink oysters are from like tropical regions.
But from the point of view of growing them in a mushroom kit, because that is one of the main parts of your business, isn't it? You're selling kits that people can buy from you, take them away and produce their own. From the point of view of growing, whether it's a UK native or one that's come from Asia, it's similar growing technique.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so they're able to, the oyster mushrooms, I think mushrooms generally, you see them obviously growing everywhere, but they're very resilient. So when you provide them, even though like you say, the pink oysters from a tropical region, if you provide them the right temperature, and it's only above kind of 21 degrees they need, it's not really hot, and then you provide them the humidity, which is by spraying it with a spray bottle, and then you've got the plastic kind of tent on it that covers it, that's enough for them to kind of simulate it. So the oyster mushrooms are a really good one to do as a kit. We do, the other style of growing that we do on the kit is with the log growing kits, which some people are more interested in because you do a bit more of the process yourself. You actually do the inoculation, as it's called, which is the basically introducing the mushroom culture to the food source, the substrate. So yeah, with the kits that we do, they're growing on straw, finely chopped straw. So they're able to kind of feed and go through that very easily, whereas as opposed on a log, it's quite a freshly cut log that you need, and then you introduce the mushrooms into the log by drilling into it and putting these little wooden dowels in, which is what was in the kit, and then the mushroom culture then has to go into the wood and break it all down, and it's fresh wood, so it's really tough. So that's a much longer term process.
But what we'll do, we'll have a chat a little bit more about the kits and how you buy them and get them going in a second. But I'm intrigued because you're a mushroom farm, so unlike a farm where it's outside, is it all in a dark shed somewhere? What is your farm?
So it is indoors, but it's not dark.
No.
Because a lot of people know about mushrooms growing in the dark, and it's true for the kind of buttons and the chestnut mushrooms that you see. But oyster mushrooms actually need a fair bit of light to trigger them to grow, and you do actually see them going. There's a couple of things that cause them to go leggy, but you do see them, going leggy like a plant if they don't have enough light.
It's going towards the light, literally.
And it's kind of simulating dappled light, as they say, in the forest kind of light. So it's not intense. It's not. The lights that we have aren't heated or anything like that, but it's a kind of bluey cold light that we use.
I'd got this vision of you in this underground old nuclear bunker growing mushrooms. So it's obviously not like that.
I mean, you could do that, and then you just have
Put some
have
artificial
the
lights in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other things that we have to control are humidity. So it's got to be really high humidity in there. So there's almost like a fairly constant stream of kind of pond mist being created. And then the also really important thing is air, the air exchange. So we're bringing in fresh air all the time for the oxygen, and then we're pulling out air as well, which is carbon dioxide that the mushrooms are emitting, and that what they grow, the whole fungi is emitting, and then also the spores that they produce. We've got to kind of get rid of them.
Right.
So those three things: the air flow, humidity, and the lights are all really important.
So all quite technical. Right. Well, what we'll do, we'll take a little break, then we'll come back and you can show me the kits and how to get started.
Okay, great.
I'm looking forward to hearing about those kits. That reminds me of sort of the 70s. It feels like, I think you said 80s, 90s. I think you were, being generous there, Martin. I think it was the 70s when mushroom kits were a big thing.
Was it? Right. I know I tried and failed dismally.
One, I failed too.
I've never done it. It does sound interesting. So I'm looking forward to hearing about how you go about, taking one of these kits and turning it into some food. Speaking of which, you need to be really careful with mushrooms, don't you? It's you don't mess with them.
Yes, you do, but I just feel I've missed out on so many opportunities because we'll have been doing a walk or a dog walk or something and seen some very tasty looking mushrooms growing, and you won't let me pick them, will you? You're a bit.
I am a bit with
overly.
them. Probably so, because I can identify field mushrooms and blue stalks and shaggy ink caps, which are all edible and delicious. But there's so many. When you look, I've got a fantastic book by Roger Phillips on mushrooms and toadstools with thousands of beautiful colour pictures in, and so many of them look so similar.
They do.
And you read one and it says edible, and the next one it says poisonous. So I think I'm not going to miss that.
No.
Yeah, there's a chance you might drop dead. There's a chance you might go on some kind of crazy acid trip. There's a chance it might just taste awful. I mean, I suppose.
Exactly. Yeah, mine would. The way my look goes, it would be the first one.
Well, that's why these kits are so perfect, aren't they? Because they look fantastic, don't they? And they really do taste good. We cooked with some a couple of weeks ago at a show, and it's they're really nice to add in to things. But we're going to talking about how you cook with them later on in the podcast, won't we? But it's quite a complicated process, really, isn't it? It's you see them growing out in the wild, and you think, oh yeah, there's nothing to it, but when Niall was sort of saying what they need and the conditions that they need, and do they have to wear masks and things when they're in there picking because of the spores?
I wouldn't have thought so, because the fruiting stage they're not producing spores, are they? So it's all very sterile. I get the feeling in there as well. So
they were on with the Hairy Bikers, I think, last year, 2023. I think they featured in one of the Hairy Biker programmes. So we'll have to have a look back at that.
Fantastic. It's probably on catch up somewhere, isn't it? Later in the podcast, we'll have some listeners' questions. There's a recipe coming from Jill, and also Martin's got some jobs. But just a reminder, if you've got a question for the team, info@potstrowels.com is our email address, and it's in the show notes of this if you want. And just a quick extra thing, if you got 2 minutes to give us a review on whatever your podcasting app is, then that really helps us just reach a few more people. Should we get on to the question? Have you got it there, Jill? Or
I have, yes, and it reminded me really, and linking with the mushrooms as well, because we once had some mushroom compost, didn't we? Which we picked up from a mushroom farm, and we put it on some of our veg borders, didn't we?
Yeah.
But there must have still been some spores in there because we got a really good crop of mushrooms, and it came over and over and over again. I made loads of mushroom soup, which was really nice. Yeah. And you put some in the green. You had a spare bale, didn't you? And you put it in the greenhouse.
Yeah, we got loads. It was really good.
Yeah, it just kept going, didn't it? So that was really good. So on the theme of a compost, we've had a question from Matthew, who lives in the southeast of the UK, and he said he's got a fairly sizable compost heap which he inherited when they purchased the house. It's about 2 metres by 2 metres, made out of oak sleepers, and it stands about 4 feet high, so it sounds fantastic. There's only one bay, but there is space on another side to do some more, so all good so far. However, he says it's covered in stinging nettles. So last year he tried to comb through it and just dig them out carefully, but everything's bounce back again. He doesn't want to spray it because he doesn't want to spread chemicals around the garden, and he lacks the confidence to know what to do next. Could he sacrifice, say, the top foot of the heap? But then if he does, what options does he have for the nettle layer? Should I simply recompost this on a second pile, Matthew says. Thanks for the advice, and do keep up the video output. He says, you're by far my favourite producer on any medium of video.
Oh, thank you, Matthew. Thank you very much.
Matthew, you're our favourite too. Right, compost. It's a big compost heap. 2 metres by 2 metres. That's, 6 foot 6 by 6 foot 6, isn't it? I mean, what you could always do if you wanted to, because that's quite a lot of bulk to get in one go, to rot it down. If you wanted to, you could almost divide it in half. So it's only 1 metre by 2 metre, and you've got 2 beds. So you could have one that's ready and one that's being made. So that might be something worth doing in the future. Just a piece of corrugated steel down the middle would do it. But back to the stinging nettle problem, these are the perennial ones. So they've got these yellow roots that trail all over the place, and they're quite invasive. If you get them in the garden, they can be quite difficult to get rid of. They don't tend to be deep rooted. Some weeds go down, but others tend to go sideways, and stinging nettles tend to be sort of the latter. They go sideways. So easier in one way to fork out, especially with the compost being quite loose. But I think what I would do to get rid of all those roots, because you do need to, if you chop them down or dig them out and leave a little bit of root in, that will regrow and it will soon colonise your wonderful compost again. I'd actually get a tarpaulin or polythene sheet in front of your compost heap, fork the whole lot out. I know it's quite a bit of work, but it's worth doing, and then you can sift through it and get rid of all those stinging nettle roots and get rid of them. Now, the roots themselves you can't compost because they would simply grow again, but the green tops you can chop off and they can go back into your compost.
Or you could make nettle cordial with
you
them.
could make nettle cordial.
Nice.
Or nettle soup. Yes.
Wow.
And we're encouraged to have a few nettles in the garden because they're good for wildlife as well, but don't put the roots back in. Certainly don't do that. And then once you've got rid of the roots, you can put all your compost back in again, in the hope that you've got rid of them once and for all.
Presumably this compost heap's got a removable front. It's not all surrounded.
I don't know.
Because that would be hard work digging that out.
Yeah, I would hope so.
It doesn't say,
make life easier if you have. But yeah, I think that's the only way. You physically, I agree, I wouldn't put any weed killer on it. I'd do it physically, get rid of them that way.
Sounds like a plan. Okay. And do we have jobs that we need to be doing if we've not got stinging nettles in our compost heap?
Well, exactly, yes. A few jobs. I'm going to be sowing some butternut squashes. So, we're here now, end of April. You could, in theory, sow them straight out into the garden now because the soil is warming up, and by the time the seeds come through, it's a bit like courgettes and marrows. You could do those directly into the garden now. By the time we sow them here, where we are in Lincolnshire, by the time they come through, hopefully the danger of frost will have gone. But I still like to be safe, so I'm going to start them off in pots. So I've got some 3.5-inch pots, a bit of compost, 2 seeds per pot in the greenhouse. If you only put 1 in, it doesn't germinate. If you put 2 in, they both grow. You could leave them both in or take the weak one out and leave the strong one. So I'm going to start the butternut squashes off to get plants to go out into the garden in early June. Planting out the sweet peas that we sowed back in February. They've made really nice, strong plants. So I've actually started to put some out up against a wigwam of hazel sticks, and there's a variety, Sean, called Jilly. Yeah. So I thought that'll get me in good books if I grow
He's so romantic.
It's such a lovely scented cream one. And then in the veg garden, keep sowing because, it's time to do it. And certainly most parts of the UK, we've still had showery weather, so the ground is moist. Things will germinate quickly. So your lettuce, your carrots, your beetroot, peas, get them all in now and they'll be up in no time at all. And last chance, if you've got clumps of, this is aimed at you, Mrs. Fish.
Okay.
If you've got clumps of snowdrops that need lifting and dividing and moving, it's about the last chance to do it because they are now starting to die down. All of a sudden, those green leaves that are there after flowering go yellow and brown and die back remarkably quick. And once they've died back, you forget where they are. So now they're dying back. That means the bulbs have swollen to the full size, ready for next year. Good idea. If they're in the wrong place or you want to thin them out, just fork them out, separate them, plant them in various parts around the garden.
Okay, that's my job, is it?
It could. Well done. Well done for volunteering. Thank you very much.
It is now.
That one.
And there endeth the jobs for the week.
Superb. Remember, if you've got a question for the team, info@potsandtrowels.com, and don't forget our videos, a weekly video every Thursday over there on YouTube, or if you're a Facebooketeer, I've made that up, Facebooketeer. If you're a Facebooketeer, actually I haven't, I read it somewhere, but I didn't know if it was in common usage. And check out Facebook as well for those videos. Shall we go back and hear a bit more about how the mushrooms are grown?
On the stand here, then, you've got some of the kits that these are what you sell to the public. So can you talk us through what people buy when they buy one of your grow kits here, mushroom grow kit? This is an oyster mushroom grow kit.
Yeah, so we've got the kind of two boxes, sometimes say the bigger box and the smaller boxes. The bigger boxes, when you pick them up as well, they're quite heavy, 2.5 kilos. So they've already been growing for about 2 weeks, the oyster kits.
Right, so essentially we've got a cardboard box. It's not particularly big. It's I'm trying to think, is that about 20 centimetre cube, something like that? With obviously your label on there, the Yorkshire Mushroom Emporium, Oyster Mushrooms. So what is inside that cardboard?
So inside that cardboard is then a plastic grow bag, which is what's got houses everything in, and in there is mainly straw based, with the mushroom culture living on it, the mycelium.
Okay.
And then also some used coffee grounds, which we get in there as well, because again, it's another oyster mushrooms thing they can feed on is used coffee grounds. It's another natural thing that they can.
And the straw, is that just raw straw from a farm you buy, or do you have to? I mean, you don't have to give me all your trade secrets, but do you have to do something to get it in the right condition?
Well, it's part of going back to the low tech approach that we take. That was mentioned earlier on. We basically use straw pellets, which are like kind of equestrian straw pellets. Right. I think people use for bedding, I think mainly, isn't it? And so they come in a kind of dry form, and we hydrate them in the correct ratio to then rehydrate them, and that makes them the form that the mushrooms can feed on. In the process that they've made the pellets, the company's made the pellets, there's a kind of sterilisation which goes on there.
Yeah.
Which is why we don't then need to treat them as such.
I see, right, yes.
As added to the fact that the oyster mushrooms their spawn is really strong and vigorous, and they can normally do well. And so it's mainly the straw, hydrated straw, and the mycelium. The starting culture.
And then, you said it's all. Oh, I can see you've got one
so
here.
So this is a display one. Yeah. So the white creamy stuff is the mycelium. So that's what grows for the first 2 weeks of their life after it goes from being wet straw. This over the first 2 weeks, this is what grows, the mycelium, which is normally underground, or you wouldn't see it. If it was in a tree, you wouldn't see it, or it was underground. It's people talk about now mycelium in the soil, and the benefits for plants and everything. So that's really what takes about 2 weeks to form. No mushrooms.
And when people buy this kit, that process has already started happening in that bag.
Yeah. So with the oyster kits, the bigger ones that are heavy, that process already has taken place and takes about 2 weeks. And in those, that's when we do it at our farm, and it's dark and warm conditions for that. And then after that 2 weeks, that's when the kind of the block, the mycelium, the fungi, the mushrooms, whatever you want to call it, are ready to kind of go into their second stage, which is the mushroom forming stage, which is what you then do at home. So we box them up at that stage, so they're in a kind of sealed, closed box, and it's dark in there. When you cut open into the box, then into the plastic bag which is housing it, you then could expose the block to fresh air, light, and then humidity, which you do by spraying it with water a few times a day. And those three things are what causes the block to form mushrooms at that point, and grow out the side of the box.
Yeah, so on the side of the box, you've got to cut this circle out, essentially. So you're cutting through the cardboard, the polythene, and that's where they'll grow out.
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
Is that on both sides? No,
just on the one. On one side. So you just do it on one side, and then they can go from a smaller opening than that, but you can see how they can grow from quite a small opening, and then they gradually just open out and open out.
Because they are fascinating. They're almost like, it's a type of bracket fungi, isn't it? They're growing out in various tiers. They're growing out as they grow.
That's it.
And then to harvest them, do you cut them or do you pull them?
You can do either. I mean, when we're harvesting them day to day, we just are always pulling them. But you can also just run a knife kind of down the back in line with the block.
Right. And will that produce a second crop?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So there's a bit of, after you pick off the first ones, you kind of leave it for a few days, not doing anything, and then you follow steps to start off the second
Right.
one, which is by soaking it in water
Mhm.
overnight, as opposed to just the spraying. Just gives it a really good chance to take up the water.
Okay.
And there's a bit of time in between, normally about 10 days, 2 weeks, but it will come again.
Yeah.
And normally for a third time as well.
Yeah, and they are delicious, aren't they? I know we had some off you last year at an event, and I'd never eaten oyster mushrooms before.
Oh,
They
right,
are delicious.
yeah.
And Jill's been cooking with them at a Harlow Card this weekend, and they are delicious. She's using them in one of the dishes, so they are interesting to grow. So is this the grey? This is the grey
Yes,
oysters. How many
yes.
different types do you do?
With the kits and the ones that we grow, there is a bit of seasonality there.
Yeah,
like we were
like you
talking
said
about earlier on.
yes,
Yeah. There's another one that's another type of oyster which is fairly similar to the greys, called pearl oyster. It doesn't form as it grows in a similar way in the clusters, I guess they all do, but it has similar, slightly smaller mushrooms and more of a creamy kind of texture.
Right.
As opposed to greys can be a bit more mottled and take on, the greys can really change the colour depending on conditions and temperature and stuff.
Right. And with the grey oyster mushroom, you can do this more or less all year round.
Yeah.
You can buy them and do them inside in the home. Yeah.
That's it. The grey is a perfect one for the home, really, because it's happy down at kind of 10 degrees.
Right.
It can grow probably about 24, 25 degrees.
Right.
It'll probably get a bit unhappy. It'll still grow, but it'll just be very quick, and
Excellent.
it'll kind of a bit dried out.
And as well as providing the kits, which is obviously DIY, people can take them home, you now also have expanded the business a bit, and you're growing them on a bigger scale and supplying restaurants and that type of thing, hotels, aren't you?
Yeah, that's it. So I guess that's what when we started out, that actually came before the grow
did it?
kits.
Oh,
yeah,
right. Okay.
yeah. So it was originally about growing the fresh mushrooms, and that is still probably, like I'd say, there are similar parts, but more of our definitely our day to day is doing the fresh mushrooms,
Okay.
and mainly selling them to businesses. So in and around Leeds, because we're based just a mile away from the city centre of Leeds, is where our kind of farm is. So there's quite a few restaurants, cafes, a few greengrocers and veg box schemes we're now getting into around the Leeds area. We're hoping to be able to come up to Harrogate soon as well, to deliver. And that's just kind of weekly cycle. So we're every week we're starting off the batches, we're inoculating lots and lots and lots of these bags basically, and then we're doing the whole process, putting them into the different stages and picking mushrooms every day, packaging them up and then delivering them kind of once a week. So we've managed to get up to about 50 kilograms a week at the moment of mainly oyster mushrooms.
That's quite a lot, isn't it? Because
It
they're
is,
not
yeah.
heavy when you put them in. That's quite a big bulk.
Yeah, I mean, this like a tray like this, that's about a kilo.
Right, so that's
yeah.
good. Excellent.
Yeah, so we're trying to make a push on that, and also trying to grow. We're doing some experiments with other varieties as well, like shiitake, which are just because the oysters, they're good, and it's difficult to grow them at scale for sure, but they're fairly straightforward. But some of the more interesting species are always a bit trickier, like I guess like plants as well. But so we're looking at shiitake and some of the king oysters, which some people know, which are the kind of big, chunky, kind of trumpet ones, which would be great. And then lion's mane is another one some people might have heard of, starting to hear a bit more, which we have grown in the past, but going to start doing that again.
Right, watch this space basically.
Yeah.
So if people want to follow you or get in touch with you, Niall, how's the best way to do it?
Social media or our website. So Instagram and Facebook are the ones that we use, and that's Yorkshire Mushroom Emporium. And then our website is the same, Yorkshire Mushroom Emporium. .co.uk, I think.
Yes,
but luckily now if you search Yorkshire Mushroom, I think
it will
we
come up.
so.
And you sell these mail order presumably,
Yes.
as well as at a live event like this.
That's it, yeah. So we don't do the fresh mushrooms online, but we do the kits
Right.
all online. So we've got the oyster kit, and then there's the log growing kit, which is the one that's more of an outdoor growing kit. We spoke a little bit about. People do more of the process themselves. And we also sell those online, and that's shiitake and lion's mane.
Brilliant.
In those ones at the moment.
Fascinating. I mean, a great idea that you say a group of friends, you sat down, hatched it out, and you've turned it into a business. So well done. Fantastic.
thank you
to
very
see
much.
Thank you.
Great
And
talking
thanks
to you.
for explaining how easy it is to do. So yes, get growing your mushrooms, everybody.
Yeah, that's it.
I think it sounds like with those varieties, that's going to be perfect for anyone who's, happy to be in the kitchen and cooking all sorts of recipes. Not that that's a blatant link over to you, Jill, and to get into the recipe.
It's not so much a recipe, it's just some sort of cooking ideas with them, really.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, I was really intrigued about the idea of, because the obvious thing you hear all the time is mushrooms, keep them in the dark, feed them, the old adage. And yeah, it's not quite like that at all, is it? It was, saying we need light. They need light like, any other growing thing.
Yeah, and the good thing about these oyster mushrooms, and there are, some native oyster mushrooms that we get growing in woodlands here in the UK, the pink ones and the coral ones, they are from other climates, but we do get oyster mushrooms, so I will look out for them. But they've done all the hard work, so essentially you buy a small cube cardboard box and inside is a polythene inner with the straw mixture and all the spawn, and it's actually starting to grow. And there's a dotted line on the side of the box that you cut out with a knife, and they just grow out of there. So it is very, very simple. We had a go last year, didn't we? We got a kit, and you get quite a few from it. It was good, and it's fun to see it. So unlike the ones of years ago where you fail, these, I think you're pretty much guaranteed 100% success. So definitely worth a go. And they are tasty.
Oh, they are. I mean, I think the thing to think about, because I was thinking it would make a good present for somebody that I have in mind, but I wouldn't want to get it in advance because you can't kind of keep it, can you? So you need to make sure you've got the posting date right.
That's right.
I was going to say, otherwise you end up giving them some mushrooms. Here you go. So here are some mushrooms.
Yes. But have you ever tried the oyster mushroom, Sean?
I'm not sure, and this is me being completely ignorant, but what do they look like? I mean, I've obviously had button mushrooms, cooked in a bit of garlic, or slightly larger ones sliced and usually cooked in garlic or butter. But no, which ones are the oyster ones then?
Well, because they grow in a clump on the side of the box. So how would you describe them?
It's more like what we call a bracket fungus. It grows sideways outwards.
Are they almost like leaves or kind of tiers?
Thick, fleshy layers almost, and they just sort of on top of each other.
And some of the, I want to call them petals, but they're not petals, are they? But they're kind of shaped
bodies.
like a...
Yeah,
do you think
like
of a tulip sort of shape with those kind of petals coming out and multiple layers of them? It's
in which case, I'm pretty sure, unless they've been chopped up and put in something, I don't think I've had those. So,
Well, really, and if you just want a few, then you can just peel some away from the clump. But if you're using quite a lot, then you can take the whole clump off. But they've got quite a mild flavour, but they're quite meaty, so quite a savoury sort of flavour, haven't they? Really,
yeah, they're nice.
And of course you can add them into dishes, but they're perfect on their own. So they've got this really lovely velvety texture. But what you mustn't do is rinse them, because they might have bits of soil on it, or you might think they're a bit dirty. But don't rinse them under the tap, because they're a bit like a sponge and they will soak up all that moisture. So really all you need to do is just brush them, or at the most use a piece of kitchen roll or something that's a little bit damp, and you can just clean them like that. So the easiest way to cook them, just if you want to cut, if they're big on the big size, then just tear them up or cut them up into pieces, and then just heat some oil and then just lay them in the pan. Don't move them. 3 or 4 minutes till they're starting to brown. Then toss them, turn them over another few minutes, and then just add in a bit of butter. Then you can put some flavours in. So put your butter in, some garlic, herbs, and then just let them cook on a slightly lower heat, and they'll take in all that lovely flavour and just soak that up. And then, just put them on some toast, really. That's all you need to do. Pour those buttery juices over. But they would work really well just tossed into some pasta. You could put them on top of some scrambled eggs. You could have them on top of steak. So really, really nice. If you wanted to add more things in, you could maybe put some chopped up shallots in there. But the herbs that go well with them, tarragon, parsley, chives, thyme. And I was chatting to her lovely herb lady that we were at a show recently, and she suggested some lemon thyme, which I thought was a really nice idea, because then you just get that hint of lemon. So yeah, I mean, just gorgeous.
My mouth is watering.
Is it lunchtime? Yeah,
it is. Yes.
You'd put them in an omelette, actually.
Oh
yeah,
like an omelette, they are. I love them in an omelette.
Yeah.
Really nice, because
we've not had many mushrooms recently because we've got children. So for some reason season. I think mushrooms are kind of a like texture that you like when you get a
Yes.
bit older, and with a 14 and a 12-year-old, it's just not worth buying it at the minute. So
No.
unless
I
we're
would
just
make
having
it.
for us two.
I'd make a spag bol, and our eldest, Amy, would pick out every bit of mushroom that was in the spag bol, put them on the side of the plate, and we'd all eat them for. And she's 39 now, and she still won't eat mushrooms, so don't hold your breath, Sean.
Don't hold my breath. Okay. We have had another question in, so perhaps we'll get into that. This is from Julia, and she says, hello to the gorgeous team at P&T. So she's obviously not seen us.
It's the advantage of a podcast, isn't it?
Absolutely. No, thank you, Julie, for the question. I live north of Perth in Western Australia. It's always said if you need to lift dahlias, do it after they've been cut down by frost. If you don't experience frost, you need to wait for the plant to die down naturally before lifting and moving. I love the happy, informative, professional format of both podcasts and your YouTube stuff. So thanks very much, she says. Well, thank you very much, Julia. Appreciate the message. Martin, dahlias, back to dahlias.
And you do know what we look like then if you see us on YouTube as well. It's all makeup though, Julie.
Not me and Jill. Not me and Jill.
Oh yeah. Well, I think we should do a
Who
special.
she's talking about then?
where I am filming it and you two could do it. That would be a
It depends
special.
if they want actual gardening content.
Exactly, yeah. Well, we'll make sure we get a photograph of Sean and Jill on there for you. Julia, yes, good. So you obviously don't get frost in Perth in Australia where you are, and that's the reason why here in the UK or colder climates you lift them, because the actual tuber, that fleshy tuber that's underground on the dahlia, would be killed by frost or at least severely damaged, depending how deep the frost goes down into the soil. So that's why here we wait until the tops are dying down in the autumn. And as soon as we get a little bit of frost, it blackens the foliage, and that's an indication to cut the tops off and dig them up and store them for the winter and then replant in the spring. In theory, you don't have to dig yours up every year, because they're not going to be frosted. They will just die down. You can cut the stalks off. They will stay dormant over the winter, and then they'll grow back again in the spring for you. But the good thing about lifting dahlias, and this is what I always say to people that say, oh, we don't have to lift them, we've had them in the ground for 10 years, is eventually those tubers get really tight and congested, and then you'll get spindly stems and you'll get smaller flowers and short flower stalks. So if you're growing them because you want them mainly for the flowers to cut for the house or nice big blooms, the idea of lifting the tubers and probably taking some cuttings off the new growth, which is a whole different thing to do, regenerates the plants. But if you're happy with them just to grow and naturalise, then in theory I think you could leave them in the ground over winter and just, in the spring mulch around them, improve the soil, a bit of fertiliser, and away they go. So you don't have to worry too much. We could pop in and do a Pots and Trowels special, couldn't we? And next time we're in Australia, we'll pop in and see you.
Yeah.
Oh, it sounds. Can I come though?
You can come, yeah.
Pots and Trowels outing.
Can we get this on expenses?
We'd have to
might
make
need a
some
bigger
money
sponsor.
for that, Martin, I think, yeah. Oh, great stuff. Well, look, just a reminder, if you've got a question, drop us an email, info@potsandtrowels.com, and if you've got a chance to leave us a review on whatever podcasting provider you use, that would also be amazing. So we run out of stuff to talk about. I don't know. Where are we at?
We have. I think we could trail ahead to next week as well, didn't we? Because
Yeah.
we're going to talk to an exhibitor that's preparing for the Chelsea Flower Show. So a few
All
tips
exciting
from
stuff.
a nurseryman. Yes.
Behind the scenes on a Chelsea stall exhibit.
Yeah. Okay.
Stall might be a bit low. Garden. Behind the scenes on a Chelsea garden. Amazing.
No, it's not a garden. No, this is in the floral marquee.
Excellent. Looking forward to it. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Watch the videos on YouTube or Facebook, follow us on Instagram, Twitter or X, and subscribe to the podcast and never miss a thing. For more information, go to potsandtrowels.com.